Hey, Brad, how's it going?
Morning, Cole. I'm doing good. How you
Good
been?
morning. Pretty good, pretty good.
Yeah, man. It's good to catch up a little bit. It's been a while. I see how
Yeah.
crazy busy you've been. What with the new album and the new etude books and everything. And you just performed in Switzerland recently,
I
right?
did. Yeah, I was playing at Bern Jazz Festival for the week.
Yeah, I saw that. And I mean, I haven't got to talk to you about it, so I was curious. Like, how did that happen? Was that are you just like hustling that hard with pulling stuff together? Or have they been has like word been getting out about like the educational stuff, or is it from your album? Like, how did that all happen?
That was actually from people that I went to school with. They work in accordance with Jazz at Lincoln Center, and they set up a week-long gig for us to play. And that was a really good experience for me because we were doing 3 sets a night. So that's like 3 hours of playing, and it was for an entire week. So we had all this music to prepare every night for this week long engagement, and that's something I've never really done before. So it was really good for me to be in the constant headspace of preparation and performance, and you know, especially in a foreign country that I had never been to before. So that was really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's nice to have a good excuse to just keep grinding like that and have something to work on like all the time.
Totally.
Now, what was it like, doing music there? Did you really get like a taste of the like their culture's appreciation for music, or was it kind of a small enclosed experience as far as like where you actually got to go and the kind of crowds you got to see there?
Well, it's amazing because there's this sort of cliche that European audiences are better and, American audiences are too loud. And, when a jazz musician goes overseas and performs, then it's like a totally different experience. And unfortunately, that's actually true. The
Right.
audiences overseas. I haven't really performed extensively in Europe, but I've been a few times on various gigs, and the audiences are always better. They're always quiet. They're always respectful. They always want to talk to and learn about the musicians either before or after the gig, as opposed to the American audience, which most of the time is very loud. And most of the time I play a solo, especially, being a bass player, playing a softer instrument, and I can't hear myself over the crowd noise, but that's seldom the case over there. It's a more respectful environment,
That's
for
good.
sure.
At first I thought you meant like loudness as in like people reacting and getting like uppity in support of the music. But yeah, now I get where you're coming from. That's
Well, that's funny because that's the other thing, because a lot of those audiences, they at their peak, they're not that loud. Even if they really love what you're doing, they don't express it in the sort of boisterous way that we do in the States. And when you experience that, it can actually be really great if an audience is that loud and supportive. It feels like a rock concert. But like the flip side of that is chances are they're going to be talking, 75% of the gig.
yeah, yeah, it's a mixed bag. It makes me think
Yeah.
of stuff like the Mingus recording where he's like please don't rattle the ice in your drinks.
Yeah,
Don't
I
ring the
love
cash
that.
register. All that, yeah, like stuff like that. Because yeah, I mean it can be distracting. But I don't know. I've never performed overseas, so it'd be interesting to see just like the different call and response with the audience. Not, I mean, like I talk to a lot of comedians on here, and they talk about how when you're trying to get like laughter out of the audience, it's almost like a dialogue.
Mm.
I mean, do you ever, when you're performing, do you ever kind of try to, obviously you're listening to your fellow musicians and you're trying to connect with the audience, but I think in Victor Wooten's book, he talks about like actively trying to like single out one person in the audience with something he's playing. Like, do you ever feel like you're trying to connect with the audience that way, or do you, when you're playing, are you just thinking of the sound you're creating for the audience as a whole?
Honestly, my thing has always been try to connect with everyone in the room, even if I'm playing for, 400 or 500 people. I try to look sort of around the room and connect with every sort of corner of the audience, every corner of the room that I'm playing in, and just sort of connect. And, it's not going to happen with everyone. So I find that if I'm getting a certain response from, say, like the middle of the room, then I'll focus my energy there or whatever. But my goal really is to give the experience to everyone in the audience, which of course is impossible, but that's how I approach maybe taking a solo in front of a larger crowd, just sort of looking at everyone rather than staring at one person. But needless to say, that's worked for Victor Wooten, so who am I to say?
Yeah, well, I can't remember exactly how he describes it, but he kind of uses it as like almost like more of a story to demonstrate like a certain his whole book, The Music Lesson. It's like the different concepts of like little it's like 7 different concepts of things in music beyond rhythm and pitch and all that. But whatever, I don't need to get too deep into that. I guess I was just more curious about how you think of it. But I mean,
Totally. The other thing is,
oh, go on. Yeah.
You're a bass player also, so you get it. I mean, our job, unless we're taking a solo, our job is not necessarily to connect or to draw attention to ourselves. I always say, like, if the audience is talking about my solo or they're talking about my feature or whatever, then maybe I didn't do a great job as a bass player. I think the goal should not be for us to connect to everyone unless we're specifically taking a solo in that moment. The goal should be to be as supportive as possible and just contribute to the experience like a role player. In basketball, you don't notice the role players like 75% of the time, but often when the star is interviewed at the end of the game, they're like, yeah, we wouldn't have won that game without this player that you didn't even see, but he or she made the play that contributed to this win. That is our job much more than connecting to the audience during our solo. That's how I feel.
Well, yeah, no, I mean there is like that role of being the glue as the bassist and like holding things together and not stepping on people's toes. I mean, obviously there's different um, settings and styles of playing, and different groups will handle it differently. But I definitely agree with that. That's something I strive for a lot, is to be more supportive than trying to draw attention to myself. But do you have any particular favorite recordings where the bassist is kind of going off in a way like that's not in line with that philosophy?
Yeah, there's this great recording called Bud Powell in Essen, where he plays at a festival in Essen, Germany, and it's with Kenny Clark and Oscar Pettiford. And Oscar Pettiford plays the most mind-blowing stuff on like 40% of the gig. I mean, he's taking extended solos, he's taking solos where he trades with Bud Powell, he's taking, these open features at the beginning of tunes. It's absolutely unbelievable, and the audience is loving it, So I guess that's an example of, a bass player doing both, and pretty much dividing it 50-50.
Yeah, that's awesome. I got to check out that concert. Love some OP.
Yeah.
So before we move on from Switzerland completely, did you get to go out and see concerts there?
It's funny because I really wish I got to go out, but I just wrapped up an all week recording session at Avatar Studios, and the music for this session was so difficult that I had to be like in my hotel room after the gig every night working on this music, which I do not regret, but I also wish that I could have seen some of, Switzerland, because basically I was just like shedding this music, then going to the gig, then going back to my hotel room to learn this music. I'm not kidding. This is like the hardest music ever. It was great music, but it was so difficult that I knew I had to spend the whole week working on it.
Well, you'll make it back, but
Yeah, I'm sure.
I mean, sightseeing is fun, and I'm sure experiencing some of the gigs would be fun. But I feel like if you're anything like me as a musician, you get a little obsessive about getting the good practice in, and I'm sure you did a lot of that. So
totally.
I don't know, that's awesome that you got to do it. So congrats on all the stuff you got moving right now.
Thanks.
Now, what made you want to do the solo bass album? Like, has that been a plan for a while, or because I saw you were just like working on recordings and making videos and writing stuff for your books. Did this just like kind of come about naturally, where you had the material and you wanted to do it, or is this something you've just specifically wanted to do for a while?
Not really. I mean, to be honest, much of what I've done on the upright bass has been the result of experimentation and a response to that experimentation rather than a sort of premeditated idea that I then fleshed out, you know. And when I was about, I think, 23, I wrote an etude for a book, and I played it for my younger brother, who's also a musician, and he was just like, man, this doesn't sound like an etude. This sounds like an actual, like, piece. Like, you should record this, not just put it in a book. So I called my friend Ben Feldman, who does video, and I was like, man, we should do this solo video of this piece that I wrote and see what happens. You know, I wasn't thinking of it like this is going to be the thing that people notice me for, and this is going to get me all these gigs, and it's going to become an album. And I wasn't thinking of it at all. I was just thinking of it like, oh, I wonder what I can do with a solo bass video. And then I posted it on Instagram, and the responses were, I don't want to say overwhelming, because I'm not Taylor Swift where I get millions of likes every day, but the responses were definitely more positive than expected. And all these bass players that I really look up to reached out to me like instantly, and they were like, man, this is great. Like, I had never heard of you before, but this stuff is really beautiful. Like, you know, and everyone I played it for was like, you have to make a solo album. Like, I've never really heard solo bass playing like this. And that wasn't a response that I expected. I was just like, man, this etude I wrote sounds cool. I should record it. You know?
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it started.
Yeah, man. I mean, it sounds awesome. It's really impressive to me because I've never really gone into the whole like performing solo. Like, I mean, it's not quite my bag, and I just never really focused on it. But have you done gigs solo like that, where you just tried to orient yourself that way?
I have, and it's really scary because you know, no one's gonna catch you if you make a mistake.
Yeah.
You know, and it's really obvious. I actually think that's closer to stand-up comedy than really anything else in music, because you only have yourself and your language, and if you make any kind of error, it's very evident to everyone, even if they don't know your instrument.
Yeah. Hopefully they're not laughing, like stand-up.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, I know it would be a good exercise for me, and I don't know, maybe I'll just, you know, jump into it at some point if it's convenient and just mess around with it. It's not really my priority as much though, because I just like, you know, I like trios, quartets, quintets. Usually is, or I guess like a quintet is probably the ideal size of a group for me. You know, I love trying different things, but you know, I love having a drummer. Especially like when I'm in stuff that I'm listening to that's recorded, I mainly listen to the drums and the bass first, and that's like what I want. Like, there's exceptions. You know, one of my favorite recordings of all time doesn't have drums. It's "Eyes of Love" by Quincy Jones.
Wow.
And
I don't know that one.
yeah, you got to check out this album, "You've Got It Bad, Girl" by Quincy Jones, and yeah, I believe it's "The Eyes of Love" has Ray Brown on bass, and it's Toots Thielmans. I still don't know if I'm pronouncing his last name right, but and whoever's on keys is killing it. But it's like a very minimalist arrangement, some strings also, but it's like so beautiful, really lush. But I was wondering
That's awesome.
if you feel the same way about ensembles, like you prefer the drums and the bass as a rhythm section player, and if you have any like particular recordings that kind of influence your approach of playing solo.
Yeah, I mean, for me, there's nothing greater than locking in with the drummer. You know, that's pretty much the greatest feeling in all music.
Yeah.
At least for me, you know. So that's my priority. And whenever I'm on a gig, the drummer makes the gig. And I think most musicians agree with that.
Yep.
You know, the band is only as good as its drummer. And, you know, in terms of playing solo, I'm trying to think of the records that really influenced me when I started doing it. There's a Ralph Towner record for ECM, which is really nice. Keith Jarrett's record, Tokyo '96, is great. That's not a solo album, but he takes a lot of solo intros on that album. And really, of course, Jocko. I mean,
Oh yeah.
Portrait of Tracy. There's a Portrait of Tracy cover on my album. It's the only song on the album that I didn't write. And that I wanted to do that song because that's where it all comes from for me. I was like, man, what if I could do all this Jocko stuff on upright? And of course, a lot of it isn't really possible, but then a lot of it is possible. So I wanted to do that as opposed to making a solo bass album where it's like, open E's for half an hour, which that's cool too. I'm not saying that isn't cool. I'm just saying I wanted to do something closer to what Jocko did with his solo stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean, the way you applied it to the upright sounded beautiful. I mean, it was really
Thank
an
you.
awesome interpretation, and it kind of fit the body of the album so well.
Thanks.
And it all had like its own unique character to it. So again, I'm really impressed with it because it's something I haven't really tackled, and I know it's something that would make me a better musician all around. So it's inspiring me to work more. I guess while we're still talking about like drums and bass, who are your favorite drum and bass combos? Whether it's in a swing or like straight ahead context, or like a funkier thing or a poppier thing, like whatever context you want to go into. Who are your favorites?
Wow. That's a hard question because there's so many great ones.
We're gonna talk about specific bassists after, but like specifically the combos of drummers and bassists.
Yeah, I would start with PC and Philly Joe because the way they play together isn't time specific; it's feeling specific, and they're not thinking I'm rushing and he's dragging, or he's rushing and I have to meet in the middle and the beat, and they're not thinking that way. They're just feeling, and that to me is really cool because there's so many records where, if you put a click on, they're not going to be playing to that click, 6-7 choruses in, but it still feels amazing. Another one is PC and Jimmy Cobb. That's closer to the time because I in my estimation, Cobb played, straighter time than maybe Philly Joe did. But again, it's really all about the feeling and how good it feels, chorus after chorus. Another one I like is Charlie Hayden and Billy Higgins. They really, in the same way that, PC and Philly changed music, Charlie Hayden and Billy Higgins really changed music because they played open in a way that was still really swinging. And a lot of people, I think, are influenced by that, whether they know it or not. Also, really anything Roy Haynes is on for me. Like, literally anything. I mean, he just sounds great with everyone, whether it's, PC or Tommy Potter or Mingus or Miroslav or whoever it is. He sounds great with anyone. So I would say those are my three favorites. I would say PC and Philly, Charlie Hayden and Billy Higgins, and then just Roy Haynes with anyone.
Awesome. Have you gotten a chance to meet Roy Haynes or see him play live?
I've never met him. I saw him play once, but I never met him.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I mean, it's so cool to see him still doing his thing.
It's incredible.
I hope to catch him at some point. But so now, if we're talking specifically bassists, are those bassists still part of your like holy trinity of upright players, or is there any other mentions you want to give there?
Of course, my favorite upright bass player, who no one would guess because I sound nothing like him, is Israel Crosby. And he was the bass player for Ahmad Jamal's trio. And first of all, he played all those recordings on a plywood bass, which is incredible. Because if you think of, what his sound was with a plywood bass, you can only imagine how incredible it would have been with a real, like, fully carved instrument. But even still, he had one of the best sounds ever. But to me, his bass lines are top notch. You know, there's so many great architects of bass lines, but if I were to pick one, I would pick him. So he's my favorite. And, you know, Paul Chambers, of course, Charlie Hayden, Ray Brown, for certain things. I mean, he's kind of like, you know, he's kind of like the Wilt Chamberlain of upright bass. I mean, he's just so powerful and so great, and he just sort of dominated everyone in a way that most bass players can't do. Like, I could never do what he does, you know? Like, when I listen to that, I'm just like, man, that is crazy to me, because even if I tried to play like that, I definitely could not.
Yeah.
You know?
So is there, how about electric bassists? Are there, I mean, you know, you can say if there's like an electric bassist who's influenced you on electric bass, because I know you play that too, but is there an electric bassist in particular who's like influenced your upright playing, who's kind of like transcended that gap? I know Jocko is probably on there, but like who
Jocko's
else?
my number one.
Yeah.
And I think, to be honest, you know, he's probably my number one on either instrument, because you know, for whatever reason, I mean, I had a phase when I was 14 and I was in this sort of fanboy thing, but when I got to college, I was, you know, really just kind of searching for a sound on upright, and, you know, checking out all the great players and finding people to imitate, and finding people that I felt like I could really imitate. And honestly, on upright, he was the one who I really connected with most. And when I transcribed him or tried to sound like him, it felt the most like me, more so than any upright bass player. And there have been a lot of upright bass players that have checked out and felt that way about. But for me, Jocko has always been the bass player that I've resonated with most on either instrument. And I think that, you know, a lot of the modern bass players have influenced my soloing a lot in terms of, you know, the way electric bass players approach language. Like Adrian Farad is someone who I've also transcribed on upright, you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I'm just getting into electric because, you know, I just graduated college, so I haven't really had much of a chance in my life to explore electric. So now I'm just getting into it, you know, for the first time. I'm checking out a lot of like Anthony Jackson, you know, a lot of his stuff with MJ, a lot of Jameson, obviously, you know.
Yeah, all great stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's cool to have that like connection, like you said with Jocko, where it just feels the most, like it resonates the most with you, because that's how I felt when I started playing. When I started learning Paul Jackson's bass lines, they like, to me, they just feel the most natural under my fingers. Like they fit the way I think about the bass, and I always feel like satisfied learning one of his lines just because it just feels like home. So I definitely get that feeling. It's nice to find that in a player and in their language, and Jocko definitely is like that to a certain extent for me. He's up there for me. Like, and I had my phase probably when I was like 16 or something, where I was deep in the Jocko stuff, and you know, I still go back to it all the time. I mean, he's legendary, so it's cool to hear that he's doing that. I mean, I'm sure a lot of upright players feel that way, but he transcends all those like barriers.
Definitely, yeah.
Not that it's that much of a barrier, but it is cool to see, and you're definitely like heavy in the upright realm. I know you're saying you got a lot of great shout-outs from players that you respect. I know Rufus Reed has said stuff about your etude books. Do you have any like particular favorite shout-outs that meant a lot to you?
Yeah. Ron Carter inviting me to his holiday party and just telling me that he's, you know, been following the work that I was doing, and, you know, he's sort of not been tracking me necessarily, but that he's hip to what I'm doing and that he respects me. That meant a whole lot, because Ron is someone who's seen as, like, you know, I had this incorrect opinion of him as someone who's like maybe not a curmudgeon, but someone who's very straight ahead and very traditional and strict in his approach, and to learn that he wasn't that way at all, and that he was totally supportive of someone who plays nothing like him and does something completely different with the instrument. That was really cool. Eddie Gomez has given me a few shout outs on different occasions, and that's been cool because he's definitely one of the, not creators, but one of the sort of purveyors of playing in the upper register and all that. Trying to think who else. John Hebert recently said something to me about my album, and that meant a lot because he's a great player, and I've been listening to him with Fred Hirsch. I think Patitucci reached out to me a few years ago. Yeah. Not to name drop, but that's some of the positive feedback I've gotten that's inspired me to.
That's what I asked you to do. That's what I asked for, man. And you delivered. It's awesome. No, I mean, like, you've definitely earned it, because every time I see you post and stuff, you're going hard with, like, even, I struggle with just, like, going more in depth with the video editing and everything, and you not only have the stuff you've written for the educational side of things and the stuff you've written and performed, like, and got together as just, like, your own solo pieces, which are, like, really in depth, probably take a long time to get together. Like, you have a lot of it, and you have them packaged well in their content online, and it's also
that's
professional
the problem,
and well
man.
done.
Like, now with Instagram, now it's like everything has to have a video element, and even like the pop stars of today, they always release like a well done video with their songs, and it wasn't always that way. You could just sort of make a record and people would listen to it, but now it's like, now people don't listen to your record, they click on it and they see what it is before they listen to it, and that's that's unfortunate because video editing is expensive and it adds a whole nother element to the process, but that's just kind of where we're at with all this.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's like I said, you're doing a great job of it. Hopefully, it's not burning too big. I mean, I wasn't sure how much of it you were just tackling yourself or how big a hole it's burning in your pocket, but I know it's complicated because the way things are going now, you have to have a whole other skill set on top of everything else just to market yourself appropriately that you can reach people.
Yeah, for sure.
So, I know you're really like deep in the jazz scene, and you're a great improviser, and you know your history really well. Is there any styles of music that you really love to play that people wouldn't necessarily guess about you?
Yeah, I'm really, really loving some of the work that I'm doing in the indie rock scene. I recently did an album with this band Lamb Chop, which a lot of people don't know about them, but they're one of the first indie bands, and they've been super influential in that world, and that's been awesome, because they're not used to upright bass necessarily, and I've been playing upright on these tracks, so that's been a great experience, and that's something I really want to do more of in my career.
That's cool. So, like, you say they're like one of the first indie bands.
Yeah.
Like, when did they come around, and what does the term indie mean to you? Because for me, I'm not. It's a pretty open-ended term.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the term actually refers to independent, like an unsigned artist. Yeah. But to me, it sounds like, really well-made singer-songwriter music, I guess. I mean, it's hard. It really is hard to define, but you know it when you hear it.
Yeah.
And a lot of the cats in that scene actually use that term to describe their music. So it seems like they know it also. We're not misappropriating it by using that term. But it is definitely hard to define the same way jazz jazz as a term is hard to define, and a lot of our musicians don't even use that word.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
It's the
yeah,
same kind of bag. It's like there is a history behind the word, and there's something that it refers to. Like to me, jazz is more the concept of the improvisational style, and it refers to like a certain lineage in like the history of uh, American music, or as like people like Nicholas Payton would say, Black American music.
totally.
But you know, I feel like it's I guess useful just to talk about where the words come from and how someone might fit into that context. But again, when did this band start
They
performing?
were really popular. They're still really popular. I don't mean to say were because they're still active and they're still touring all over the world. But they were, I guess, they came to prominence. Is what I meant to say. Like in the '90s, and they influenced a lot of the modern indie people for sure. And now they're open to experimentation
Yeah.
and using different instruments. And one of the guys from Bon Iver reached out to me recently about doing some stuff. Maybe I shouldn't say that on a broadcast, but whatever. And
Well, damn.
they're talking about just doing more stuff with upright as opposed to electric, which is what they're used to. And that's something I'm really interested in because I feel like upright fits more music than just jazz. And most people look at the upright bass as just a jazz instrument, right?
Yeah.
And it can function in so many different contexts. And when I hear a lot of that, I guess you would say indie music, I hear upright on it as opposed to electric. I mean, electric sounds great with almost anything, but I think the timbre of the upright is closer to the timbre of the human voice. And that, to me, creates a really beautiful connection that hasn't been necessarily explored in music outside of jazz.
Well, yeah, I think if you write properly for it, you can fit it into any context. And I think trying to push the instrumentation to its boundaries is probably the best thing you can do for creating something new that is actually like memorable to people. But that's I mean
Totally.
that's another awesome name drop. So I hope that materializes, and I can't wait to hear it.
Yeah, just speaking it into existence.
um, but so okay, those are the other styles that you play. How about when it comes to what you listen to? Is there anything that you listen to that people wouldn't necessarily expect?
Yeah, I listen to a good amount of hip hop, but man, I a lot of being a musician, as you know, is separating what you like from who you are. And just because I like it does not mean I can play it. And it's the same with classical music for me because I came up playing classical music and I just wasn't good at it. There's like certain people are just good at certain. I hate to, divide music into genres, but it is true that certain people are good at specific styles of music and they gravitate towards specific styles of music no matter how much they like it. I'll go through
Yeah.
like weeks where I listen to way more classical music than jazz, but that doesn't mean I can play it.
Yeah. Well, I think it's like you said with Jocko. It's like some things just resonate with you the right
Totally,
way, and
yeah,
it's like there are bassists who I love who I don't have no interest in trying to sound like them. Like
exactly, yeah.
like Stanley Clark. Like I like his upright playing honestly more than his electric playing. And he's a fantastic electric bass player, but I really am not interested in sounding like his tone on electric bass. It's great, but it's just not. It doesn't resonate with me the same way Paul Jackson does. Um, and
Yeah,
and
I
I
agree.
yeah, and I feel like there's a lot of things in music where it's like I enjoy this, but it's not. I'm not gonna if I'm picking the tunes, this isn't like what I'm going for. Um, there's like groups like I love the band. You know the band?
Like the band called The Band.
Yes.
I've literally never checked them out.
Oh, they're like I don't know. I'm not like super deep into their discography, but they've got a lot of like hits that are I don't know. They feel like kind of like folksy or rock. But the rhythm section's just so funky. The songwriting's so good. The recordings are done so well. They got this like really warm, like classic sound of the recordings. And I if if I was writing music, it would probably never come out quite like that. But there's like something about it that I just love listening to so much. You got to check out the band. They sound so good.
I'll check them out. Yeah.
And honestly, probably would sound really cool on Upright. Some of those songs.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so I kind of want to talk a little bit about like what you were into at an early age and like when you started playing bass. Like what was your first introduction to music? Even if it wasn't from like playing and you didn't know that you wanted to play, like how were you first conceptualizing of music?
Yeah, so I first started out as a singer, like an opera singer.
Oh,
just
okay.
singing
Would
in
not have
choirs.
expected that.
Yeah, and I did that for like 10 years. And that, looking back, obviously I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back, that's something that has really informed just how I hear music and how I play. And I always say that, what I do in the upper register has a lot to do with that, because I was a soprano, so I grew up hearing those melodies and hearing the higher voice before anything else. And, I did that for about 10 years. So that was...
Starting at what age?
Starting at age 4.
Oh, my God.
So, yeah, so that's... I've been playing upright for 10 years, so I've been a singer as long as I've been playing upright bass. So that's, like, for me, I think where it all started. And then when I was 14, my dad bought me an upright bass because he said that was the instrument on which I would get the most work, because there's always a need for upright bass players, and the demand is higher than, say, a sax player or a drummer. And he was right. So I really did not like playing it for at least the first 4 years.
Yeah.
But I definitely came to fall in love with it. And that's really how I started playing.
Well, so before you played bass, when you were just a singer, was that like a career option for you? Like, how soon were you thinking of exploring a career in music? And did you feel the same way about singing, or were you just not that interested in the beginning?
I can't even answer that, because I started so young that I don't even remember how I was feeling. And, the funny thing is, for me, I've never thought of music as a career. I do now, obviously.
Yeah.
But when I was growing up, I never thought of it that way. I always thought of it as just like, this is what I do. I never really thought of any other option of what I wanted to be or what I wanted to do in life. It was just, this is it. From age 10 or 11, I was just like, yeah, this is what I do. There was no other option for me. And when it came time to, apply for colleges or whatever, I didn't even consider the option of a non-music college, or I wouldn't even consider the option of a non-music high school, or whatever it was. There wasn't even really a point of decision. It was just, this is it,
Yeah. Now, let's say in another life you had nothing to do with music. What would be the next art that you'd want to tackle outside of all of that?
Wow, that's a tough question. I can't really picture a reality where I'm not doing that, but I guess I'd probably be a fashion designer, because, I grew up in Manhattan and I like fashion, so I think that's probably what I would do.
That's awesome. That's, again, not what I would have expected. So, is there any? Do you see yourself venturing into that kind of thing?
No, I don't see myself venturing into anything.
Well, I'm not. Not to put the music stuff aside, but you like rap and you like basketball, and you're gonna tell me you don't want a shoe deal? First upright player with a shoe deal?
Man, I don't even know what that is. Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, it's separating what you like from who you are. I know that, like, there's certain things that I like that I could never do. For example, like, I'm just really unathletic. Like, I watch sports all the time. I don't play sports, you know. It's just not me, you know. That's not what I do. Like, I'm not even gonna take. I mean, I probably wouldn't even take a hip hop gig, to be honest, because I don't. I mean, you know how to do that, but you know, I would feel uncomfortable. I would be like, why are you giving me this gig? Like, come on.
Come on, you're such a savage, man.
I'd probably ask if I could play upright, but
yeah, but
if
there's people that do that upright on.
Yeah, I would ask if I could play upright, but if someone asked me to do a hip hop gig on electric, I would feel so out of place, you know. But that's music I listen to all the time, so you know, you got to separate really what you like and what you think you want to do from who you are.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, there's definitely always sacrifices, and it's kind of why it's like I'm asking this is like, oh, like an alternate universe kind of thing. But that being said, shoe deal. You
What is a shoe deal?
Shoe deal. Like
a shoe deal.
Like how like basketball players or rappers will have like their own like line of shoes.
Man, jazz musicians with endorsements, that is a crazy thing to me.
Yeah.
I was in Times Square and I saw an ad where Mark Turner was modeling for Uniqlo. And I looked at that ad like 10 times because I could not believe that Mark Turner was endorsed by Uniqlo. And I was like, okay, that's cool. Like, I want to do that. I want to get a deal with, you know, a massive clothing company. Like, that's sick.
That's what I'm saying, man. I think you could do it. Just start wearing Gucci in all your bass videos and tag them in all your stuff. But like, no, I mean, I think it's cool. I think that's another, you know, if you like fashion so much, man, I see it. I could see it happening.
I should do that.
You're already a hip dresser. I'll say it. I'll say you're looking good in those videos, man. You got it. The what you were wearing in the Portrait of Tracy video.
Oh
yeah. Yeah.
Oh, thanks.
All right. Well. All right. Listen, man. Just keep me in mind as a consultant for your shoe deal. But just to move on to another similar topic, since we brought up basketball so early on, we're talking about basketball endorsements. Now, how long have you been into basketball? Like, where did that start?
Honestly, you know, my dad's a big fan, so he would just always have it on, and I would just always watch it. And, you know, it's something I always wished that I was good at and always tried to be good at, but it just did not happen.
I feel you, man. I mean, I was never that into basketball in particular. I've always loved sports a lot, and I was very unathletic when I was younger, like just terrible. And I always loved watching good players. I never followed teams. I just love watching a good play.
I'm the same way, yeah.
And I was always super bad at basketball, and I just didn't really like it because of that. But then once the pandemic hit, I moved back to my hometown of Greenville, New York, and I actually did some odd jobs for a neighbor and got his hoop, and just started messing around with it every day. And I suck, but I figured out the fundamentals. Coming from nothing, I actually have a little bit of confidence in myself in that degree. So I wouldn't say it's impossible, but again, I get you wanting to like stay in your own lane. But I do think it's like such a cool like culture to understand like the different players and what they mean in that context. Because when you watch someone like push the envelope and change the whole like history of the game, it's a lot like music, like watching a player.
It really is a lot like jazz, especially. You know, I had a teacher at Juilliard who would always say, you know, stop thinking about playing in terms of expressing yourself. You know, if you're on a basketball team, the goal is not to express yourself. And I was like, yeah, you know, that's it. Because, you know, obviously you want to be expressive and you want to put all of yourself into everything that you do. But, you know, a lot of the time, it's not about expressing yourself. It's about supporting the team and helping the team and understanding your role. And I think people who grow up playing basketball understand that the same way that jazz musicians do, you know?
Yeah, and it's about, you know, fundamentals. It's
Yeah,
you
totally.
can come out with a cool trick, but if you don't have good fundamentals, it's not gonna you're gonna not do your job. Um,
Yeah.
Now, do you have any like controversial basketball opinions or anything you feel very
Honestly, I'm
strongly
not.
about right
I'm
now?
not. So the thing is, I'm not. Since I don't play the game, I don't feel comfortable having controversial opinions because it reminds me of when people, you're at like a family friend's house and they say something ridiculous, like, Kenny G is the best musician
Yeah.
because he sold the most records. And you're like, and to him, that's like, or to whoever is saying that, that's like a controversial opinion. And they're like, oh, that's my hot take. That's my jazz hot take. But for us, that's like the dumbest thing we've ever heard,
Yeah.
So it's like, if I said something, if I had like I feel uncomfortable having a hot take or a controversial opinion because someone who actually plays basketball is just going to be like, you're an idiot.
Well,
So that's,
you're not an
yeah.
idiot. I'm being the idiot. I'm trying to stretch this interview to its
What's your hot take?
my hot take in basketball. Man, the Bucks are having a great season. I don't know enough either. You seem like you would know more than me. I just love watching a good play. So,
Yeah.
but I thought I'd push you to say something wild,
Oh, no.
But no, you're so humble. You know when to stop, and that's a good thing, I think.
Yeah.
But it's nice to talk about. I do love basketball. It's just
Mm,
like you said. It's like I don't know enough to say anything, profound about it. But
totally.
but I do want to play to the strengths of what you're interested in. I guess like, is there another big interest outside of music you have that is just like a nice source of entertainment for you, even on
Yeah,
the
totally. I'm really into running. I mean, I try to run like,
That's
6 to 8 miles every other day. And that's like, just helps me stay light. I mean, I'm kind of at the point now where everything I do just leads back to music in some way or another. And, running just helps me stay light and stay connected and stay in control of what I can do physically on the instrument, really. But, it helps with everything. So I'm definitely, I would say I'm passionate about running and trying to get better at that.
That's cool. Do you have any tips for runners? Because I'm not. I don't know. I don't know if it's. I like running on like a trail, but
Yeah,
what helps you get in the zone to just you? I see you post stuff where you're like running around the city, or around what, Central Park.
yeah. It's a lot of it is mental, and it's just like extended practicing. It's like, just admit to yourself that you don't really want to do it, but you're going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's, to me, that's what practicing is. I mean, if you want to practice, then like you really want to experience practicing for 4 or 5 hours a day, then you're doing it wrong because you shouldn't want to do it. You should want to do it for the end result of getting better, but you shouldn't enjoy it. I mean, that's not the point.
Yeah.
So that it's the same thing with running. Like, I don't actually necessarily enjoy the act of running, but I enjoy the feeling of getting better and the feeling I experience when I'm done. So that I find a lot of similarities between distance running and practicing a lot, which I know that's not the answer you were looking for because we're talking about things outside of music, but I think at this point in my life, everything just relates back to the thing.
No, you
So
can tie
yeah,
it back. I like that answer. You can tie it back to
yeah,
music as much as you want, but I do want to I want to dig into the more oddball subjects.
yeah, yeah.
What's your longest run, and do you want to do like marathons and stuff like that?
I'm training for that. My longest so far is 10 miles, but I want to be able to do more.
That's cool. That's cool. Tougher than anything I do. You're you're a savage, Cole, on the bass and on the pavement. Um, so as far as like a creative direction when you're writing music or anything, do you think of things in like story terms? Like, are you really influenced by like lyrics or books or movies as far as like building a narrative? Or when you write music, is it more just a sonic experience for you?
I don't really write lyrics, so I can't say that I'm lyrically driven or motivated, but I do like to think of a narrative, and I do like to draw on personal experiences more so than anything else. But, I mean, to be honest, sometimes music for music's sake is the way to go. And I know that's, I guess, a boring thing in this era of, everything has to be about something. A lot of the time it's just like, wow, this idea is really cool.
Yeah.
How far can I develop it? I mean, and if you think about like a solo or a bass line, you're not thinking, what is this bass line about?
Yeah.
You're not thinking that. You're just thinking like, this is a good bass line. This is, that maybe it's driven by an experience you had on that day. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's just a good bass line,
Yeah, I think it's all still language. I think you're still conveying
Totally.
something, even if you don't have a specific thing in mind in terms of like a story. I think you're still conveying something that people get.
Yeah.
Do you ever try to think of a solo that way, or is that more of like a stream of consciousness kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, if I have a certain experience that I'm thinking about, maybe the solo will be somewhat influenced by that. But honestly, it's mostly stream of consciousness, and for me, writing is the same way. I mean, ideas come into my head, and I don't really know where they come from. And since I'm not necessarily dealing with lyrics, I can make an idea interesting or profound without having to ascribe some kind of deeper meaning to it.
Yeah.
I know I would probably never get any grant ever with that statement, but that's
Yeah.
kind of where I'm at. Yeah.
Well, so are there any songwriters? I mean, do you feel more closely influenced by instrumental composers, or are there any songwriters who have had a profound impact on how you write music?
Actually, it's a mix of both. Paul Simon is a really big influence on me. A lot of his
Okay.
stuff, yeah,
Right.
a lot of his stuff influenced my album, and a lot of the solo stuff that I do actually comes from a lot of his songs, which I've learned and played along to a lot. Joni Mitchell is a really big influence also. I mean, that's a more typical influence for jazz musicians, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'm definitely influenced by both of them really as much as any jazz musician.
Yeah. That's very cool. I'm sure you love that Joni Mitchell concert, the video with Jocko. I
Yeah,
can't
I
remember
mean,
the name.
everyone loves that video. I was
Yeah.
actually listening to a podcast with Matheny where he says that concert was interesting. And that's, and it's obviously he's being really positive, and everyone's asking him, how was playing with Joni Mitchell, and he's like, Joni is amazing, and it was interesting, and I'm like, wow, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
It totally changed my view of that concert because, in my estimation, it was like, wow, everyone sounds like they're having so much fun, and I'm like, man, I would have loved to be on that concert, but I don't know. You
Yeah.
never know.
And what's cool is just to see the different contexts Joni would put everything in. And I
Oh,
mean,
totally.
she's another one where it's like, yeah, I know some of the hits, but I need to get deeper into the discography to really get her. And she obviously just has her own style that's so deep. And it's so cool to see musicians that have affected me more personally with her.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
and when I was in my Jocko phase, those videos were definitely a big part of it, you know. Um, but so I guess that's what I wanted to ask about your thoughts as a composer. Another thing I like to touch on with a lot of my guests, we already touched a little bit on stand-up comedy, but I'm a huge stand-up nerd, so I
Yeah.
gotta know who in the realm of comedy has influenced you or just touched your life, even if you don't think of it that much deeper than that.
Honestly, I mean, I like Norm Macdonald a lot. I like his
Rest in
YouTube
peace.
videos.
Oh my God, one
Yeah,
of the best.
yeah. Um, I honestly can't say I'm that deep into it. I mean, I'm I'm a Jew from New York, so obviously I love, Seinfeld and Larry David and Woody Allen, even though that's probably the most controversial thing that I'll say on this interview.
It's okay.
Yeah.
I love Louis C.K. and not everyone's
Yeah,
gonna love
I mean, I
that.
love him also. It's like, yeah, you know, what are you gonna say? It's like I like this stuff. Like,
yeah. Woody's thing's a little bit worse than Louis C.K., but yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's horrible. And I also like, you know, you know, we don't control what we like, so you know, I'm definitely a fan of all that stuff in that school of comedy. But in terms of actually being deep into it, I'm pretty comfortable admitting that I know very, very little of that world. But it seems like you're in that world for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's always something I've had a love for, and it's similar to music. I love the history. I love, you know, seeing the innovations and different people's styles and all that. Um, and like I said, you know, it's just something I like to bring up with the guests because most people don't think about it that much, but I feel like everyone has some artist that has touched them and you know, entertain them throughout their life. I mean, is there anything, just comedy in general, like movies or things that have like a particularly fond memory of?
Um, a movie that I have a particularly fond memory of.
I was saying a funny one, but it can be any movie, really. I mean,
yeah, I mean, this is the thing because, you know, I on various podcasts and whatever, I get asked about this, and I don't have an answer. I mean, I really think I've seen like 12 movies in my entire life. Like you know, I don't know why. Looking back, my life has been like that, but I do not understand the references that anyone makes ever. Like, you know, I really feel like sometimes I've been living under a rock because I don't understand any of these things. Like, someone will make a reference to some movie that literally everyone but me has seen. And they're like, oh, that's from Pulp Fiction. Like, you don't know that? And I'm like, yeah, no, I don't get these references. So I honestly cannot answer that question.
that's fair. That's fair. There's some big stuff I haven't seen. I've been there, but I love learning where references come from. Like shows like Family Guy reference so much stuff. It's like the history of like jazz or something. I like hearing where the reference came from. Hip hop, there's a lot of that with the sampling and the quoting other rappers. I love all that kind of stuff, and that goes right back to jazz again. So I don't know. Again, I'm a nerd. Stuff I like talking about. You're a really interesting guy, Cole. I really appreciate you being on my show.
You.
It's always a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you for having
me. We got to wrap it up, but what else should people be looking out for, and where should they look for your stuff online?
I'm releasing a bunch of duo stuff with some special guests that I can't mention yet, but they're very exciting, and I'm going to be posting that on Instagram next month, so look out for that.
Awesome. Cole Davis. Is it Cole Davis Music on Instagram?
Cole Davis Music, yeah.
What's your website again?
It's also ColeDavisMusic.com.
Sweet. All right, Cole.
Yeah.
Well, we'll wrap it there. Thank you so much. Great talking with you.
Thanks for having me, Brad. Take care.